Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we're taking a look at Valve released games. Now these are just the ones that I've played. They have released a couple outside of this list, most notably Half-Life Alyx, which I still have yet to play. I really want to play it, but I can't review it until I have had that experience. So here are just the games that I've played. I've played all of them on this list, some far more than others because in my opinion some are far better than others. Starting us off, we have Ricochet. This is one of Valve's earlier games. I believe it came out in 2000. And if you've never heard of this game, honestly, you're not missing out on much. It's really not that great. It's sort of like this weird, low-gravity platform FPS game where you're like bouncing between platforms, like launching these discs that like ricochet, and you're trying to hit other people. I've launched this game only a handful of times, and only one time has there ever been people actually on a server. Honestly, if you're really bored one day and it's already in your library, you can start it up. It takes like 2 seconds to download. It's like less than 100 megabytes or something. That being said, I would not ever recommend buying this game for its standard price. I think it's still at $5. It should be free at this point, honestly. But I get why it's not. But Ricochet, you know, it's a cute game. But that being said, it's not really a fun game. Ricochet gonna find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have the original Half-Life, came out in 1998. As I said in my Half-Life tier list video, this is one of my all-time favorite single-player games. I absolutely love the Half-Life series, and Half-Life 1 is probably my favorite one to play in the entire series. Absolutely love Half-Life 1. Definitely gonna be a solid S tier for me. Really enjoy that game a lot. Up next, we have a Deathmatch Classic, which is basically Half-Life 1, but it's a deathmatch version, so you're fighting other players, and it's really funny. I've launched this game a few times, put a couple hours into deathmatch. Honestly, it's kind of fun. If you like playing Half-Life 1, you know, you get to use the Half-Life weapons, even the goofy ones, like, you know, the glue-on gun. And honestly, it's okay as far as, like, just deathmatch games go. Another one that I would never pay for, but if it's already in your library, you know, give it a try. You might find some people on a server. Funnily enough, I played this game a couple times, and one of the times it was about a 2-year gap between when I had launched it, and there was the same people on this server that I joined last time. It was the craziest thing. I couldn't believe it. I think these people literally just play Deathmatch Classic, and that's all they do. So a very strange community around that game, but overall, it's honestly not bad. It's kind of fun. You know, if you and your friends are really bored one night, launch it, give it a try. It's alright. Definitely going to be in the C tier for me, though. Up next, we have Half-Life Blue Shift. This is one of the kind of sequels, not sort of sequel, sort of not sequel to Half-Life 1, where you get to play as Barney Calhoun. And as I mentioned in my Half-Life list, it's definitely a fun game, but it is a very short game. You know, you can probably finish it in like an hour and a half, or maybe even an hour if you're really cruising. As far as the Half-Life games, this is probably one of my least favorite. It's still really fun, don't get me wrong. It is interesting. If you like Half-Life, it's nice to get that kind of alternate perspective from the game. But overall, Half-Life Blue Shift, not my favorite one, but still good enough to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have Half-Life Opposing Force. Now, this is one that if you really like Half-Life 1 or the Half-Life series in general, I highly recommend it. You get to play as Commander Shepard, and just super fun. You know, takes all the good things about Half-Life 1 and then trims out honestly some of the boring parts, so it's like a shorter Half-Life 1 that's more, I won't say more fun, but just as fun from a different perspective. So super fun. Absolutely love the storyline of this one. Definitely going to be another S tier for me. Up next, we have Half-Life 2. This game honestly is phenomenal. It was actually the first Half-Life game that I played. I'm a huge Half-Life 2 fan. Really love the game. Very lengthy. You know, you can really put a lot of time into exploring the world. Super fun. And when this game was released, like, the physics engine was super great. And even today, the physics engine still holds up. Super fun game. Half-Life 2, honestly, gonna be another S tier for me. Up next, we have Half-Life 2 Deathmatch. Now, pretty much as you would expect, it's like Half-Life 1 Deathmatch, but with Half-Life 2 weapons. That being said, I think this one is actually less fun. And honestly, you know, there's not too much to say about it besides using the gravity gun, as you can see in the picture. Using the gravity gun is pretty fun. But you know, the regular weapons in Half-Life 2, I'm actually less of a fan of compared to Half-Life 1, so it's still going to find itself in the C tier, but definitely a little bit below where Deathmatch Classic would be. Up next, we have Half-Life 2 Lost Coast. Now, this is an interesting one. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure what the thought process was behind designing this game. I believe it was some chapters that they took out of Half-Life 2 that they just made into its own game. And this is another one where if you really like Half-Life 2, give it a try. It's really short. I think I beat it in like less than an hour. So very, very short, but adds a little bit of storyline to kind of the coastal airboat part from Half-Life 2. So it's interesting, it's fun, but there's really nothing that you're missing. You don't really get a whole lot of story background. So Half-Life 2 Lost Coast, not really a huge fan. Of all the Half-Life games, this is probably the one that you can kind of just ignore. You really don't need to play it. So Half-Life 2 Lost Coast is going to be in the C tier. Up next, we have Half-Life 2 Episode 1. Of course, the sequel to Half-Life 2. I think this one is pretty good. As far as the Half-Life 2 games go, this is probably my least favorite. You spend a lot of time driving, and there is some interesting parts, but there's really not too much character development. It's kind of just you and Alex escaping the Citadel and, driving for a really long time. So it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Another really good one. I would say this one is more interesting than Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And of course, unfortunately, this game leaves us on a huge cliffhanger if you've played it. I suppose I won't spoil it if anyone hasn't played Half-Life games at this point and they want to. That being said, it's still a really fun game. Definitely enjoy Episode 2, and it's going to find itself in the A tier. Up next, we have Portal 1. Now, this game is phenomenal. I am not a huge puzzle game fan. There's very, very few puzzle games that I really enjoy, but Portal was one of them. I didn't really think I was going to enjoy it, but when they released it, I thought, I'm not going to pick it up. Picked it up a couple years later, and I really enjoyed this game. The story is interesting, but that's not even like the main focus. The main focus is just the gameplay, it's so satisfying. And another game where the physics just feels so good. The movement, like throwing things through portal, launching yourself through portals, it all feels so, so good. Portal really surprised me. Definitely going to be a very solid A tier. Up next, we have the sequel, Portal 2. Now, this game literally took everything good about Portal, expanded on that, and then added more good stuff. I really don't have a single complaint about Portal 2. It's a great game, doesn't take that long to beat, and the co-op is super fun. If you have one other friend and you want to kind of play a goofy puzzle game, play Portal 2. Its co-op is phenomenal, and there's a ton of custom community-built levels that are also really fun. Portal 2, definitely going to be in the S tier. Up next, we have Team Fortress Classic. Honestly, the prequel to Team Fortress 2 that not many people, I think, even know exist. But honestly, as far as just deathmatch games go, I actually really enjoy this one. Of I believe the Gold Source engine, which is, this one and Half-Life 1 Deathmatch were built on. I believe this is a really good deathmatch game considering it was built on the Gold Source engine. The classes are pretty interesting. There's not quite as much goofiness as there is in Team Fortress 2, but Team Fortress Classic is honestly a pretty fun game, and last time I played it, there was actually a decent amount of servers that had people playing on it, so Team Fortress Classic, I actually enjoyed the game, gonna find itself in a solid B tier. Up next, we have Team Fortress 2. Honestly, there's a lot to say about this game. For many years, Valve completely ignored this game, didn't really do any expansions to it, and then all of a sudden they did the Hat expansion pack, started adding new weapons, they did the Man vs. Machine, and in the recent years they have added some decent stuff to Team Fortress 2, so I like that they've been, taking a look at their old games and, making sure that they're not completely rejected in the corner of the attic. So Team Fortress 2, I really do enjoy it. A really good game just to play with a bunch of friends and go onto a community server. Is a little bit more fun in my opinion, but a lot of fun weapons, pretty goofy game. Team Fortress 2 gonna find itself in the A tier. Up next, we have Day of Defeat Source. I believe there's also Day of Defeat Classic, which is on the Gold Source engine, but I don't have much experience with that one. Only played Day of Defeat Source, which I actually do enjoy. If you like, a World War II deathmatch-esque type game, I think this one is pretty fun. It's really easy to jump into. Similar to Team Fortress, you just pick a class and you go, so it's not like a lot of other shooters where you have to like grind for weapons. You can just play whatever class you want, and it's a pretty fun game. I've put a little bit of time into it. Nothing too special, but Day of Defeat Source, good enough to find itself in the B tier for me. Up next, we have CounterStrike, which was originally, as you can see by the little poster here, was originally a mod for the Half-Life game, and then was made into its own game. And CounterStrike 1.6, a lot of people really like it. It's some of their favorite Counter-Strike, Personally, I preferred CounterStrike Source, but 1.6 still is a lot of fun. Even now, going back and playing it, it still has a fairly active community. A lot of community servers are pretty full. A pretty fun game, but as far as Counter-Strike games go, I'm not as big of a fan of this one as many people are. Some people grew up playing this one. I grew up playing Counter-Strike Source, so I'm a little bit more akin to that one, but that being said, Counter-Strike 1.6 still is a very solid game, and for me, good enough to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have Counter-Strike Condition Zero, which is built on the same engine as 1.6. This one, there's really no changes. There's community servers on this one as well, but mainly people play this for the campaign. Yeah, not many people know, but there is a Counter-Strike campaign that exists. Condition Zero is one of the lesser-known Counter-Strike games, if not the least known, but overall, it's really okay. The campaign is nothing special. It's kind of fun. If you really like the classic Counter-Strike feel, give it a try, but for me, not too much going on there. Just going to find itself in the C tier. Up next, we have CounterStrike Source. Now, this was the first Counter-Strike game that I got, and the one that I put a ton of hours into before CSGO got released. And, I spent so much time in community servers, playing Jailbreak, Surf servers. I mean, there's just so many fun game modes, hide and seek, just so many things to do in Counter-Strike Source. Really enjoyed that game, playing just so many hours into that game on my old crappy computer, playing with like 30-40 FPS even on this game. But yeah, really enjoyed Counter-Strike Source. Definitely going to be in the A tier for me. That game just, it has a special place in my heart for sure. Up next, we have Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, this game is probably the one that I put the most amount of hours into. I believe on my Steam account, I have well over 1,300 hours into the game. And honestly, for good reason. I really like this game. It's my favorite shooter that I've played. There's a lot of skill, a lot of strategy involved. And CSGO, I just really enjoy it. Can be infuriating at times, but considering it's a free-to-play at this point FPS, that's not pay to win, it's hard to ask for much more, with the exception of Valve. You got to get a better anti-cheat. I don't know when CSGO 2 is coming out, but anti-cheat needs to be a priority for that game. But CSGO, I still love it. Definitely going to be an S tier for me. Up next, we have Left 4 Dead 1. Now, this game was a pretty good game when it came out. The only reason I'm not going to place it higher is because it's so overshadowed by its sequel, Left 4 Dead 2. But that being said, Left 4 Dead 1, it started the franchise, did a great job. Left 4 Dead 1, it's a solid game. Going to find itself in the B tier. That being said, Left 4 Dead 2 literally has all the levels and characters from Left 4 Dead 1 and then more. And, new, better zombies, new, better guns. Left 4 Dead 2 is just phenomenal. I love this game. If you have, 3 other friends that you want to play with, this game is super fun. The multiplayer versus mode is really fun where you can play as the zombies, but one of my favorite things to do is me and 3 of my friends, we just go into the campaign, put it on the hardest difficulty, and just try and survive. Because it is brutal, it is hard, but it is a lot of fun, and you're going to make a lot of good memories doing that. Left 4 Dead 2, definitely going to be in the S tier for me. Up next, we have Dota 2. Now, I haven't put Dota 1 on this list because I've played almost no Dota 1, maybe like less than an hour. But Dota 2, I have given a fair shake. I've played quite a bit of League of Legends, as you can see by my other League of Legends videos. In Dota 2, I have given it a decent try. I put probably 20-30 hours into the game at one point. That being said, for me, somebody who I feel like when you start with a MOBA, usually that's the one that you stick to. And I started with League of Legends, so trying to play Dota 2 was a bit jarring for me. It's very different. And that being said, I do enjoy Dota 2, and I think some of the characters, the heroes, I suppose as they call them in that game, are more interesting than some of the League of Legends champions. But Dota 2, I'm just personally not quite as big of a fan as League of Legends. That being said, it's still a very solid game and pretty fun to play even when you don't know what you're doing. So for me, Dota 2 gonna find itself in the B tier. Last, and I will admit least, is Artifact. Now, this is a game you might not have even heard of. It's kind of flown under the radar in recent years, but this game was a game that came out when Hearthstone was really big, and basically all the gaming companies were like, holy crap, we can make so much money making online trading card games. And this was Valve's try at making a trading card game. They did a lot of things wrong with this game. First off, similar to Hearthstone, it was kind of pay to win where you had to buy a lot of packs. But even worse than that, at least Hearthstone is free to play. Artifact, you still had to pay for just to play it, and then you had to spend more money to get the packs. And in recent years, they've almost abandoned this game completely. I don't believe they've had any updates in quite a while now, and I believe they even made a statement saying they won't make more updates. They also made Artifact free to play, so you can play it now. That was actually when I picked it up. And I will say, the actual gameplay of Artifact is not bad. There are some trading card games that I think are kind of boring, kind of slow, kind of uninteresting. I think the mechanics of this game are okay. It's a decent trading card game. That being said, the pay-to-win aspect was too much, and the fact that you had to pay just to get it right away killed this game from the beginning. Had they released it free to play from the beginning, this game might still be relevant, but at this point, it's really not relevant. Not many people playing it. I believe it's Valve's least played game on Steam, even below something like Ricochet. But yeah, Artifact, for all those reasons, gonna be in the F tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.